Thank you so much for tuning in to the World Builders Anvil, episode 224. A plague this way comes.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Welcome back. I'm a creeped out Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And down with the sickness, I am Michael Miller.
I've actually been really excited to do this episode, and I forget who started talking about plagues. Do you remember who started this?
Creepily so, you've been excited about this one.
Yes. I love diseases, fictionally speaking.
I love diseases, said nobody ever. Unless your name is Jeffrey W.
Yes. But fictionally speaking, I do personally think diseases are awesome. First off, people are scared to death of the invisible threat of a disease.
Scary idea, scary concept.
It is, and I actually did a quick thing, and there'll be links to this in the show notes. If you go to garduel.com, you can find them there. Half of the Americans say they are afraid of the growing threat of infectious diseases in the country. So right now it's a growing thing where it's a very high concern for people. And when people are concerned about things, ironically, they like to consume fiction that involves such things because it's a weird way to deal with it. But people do.
That is a strange
it's because it's on their mind. True. It's because it's on their mind, I think, And in general, people are scared of germs, but especially infectious diseases with the rate at which antibiotics are starting to fail because they become diseases become resistant to them over time. People keep hearing about super bugs. And so it's something, people, it's in their mind. So when they engage with it in the story, it's likely to really attached to them. It's a good way to get to them, And I think you get some great types of fiction that use the pandemic in general. First of all, it's a great way to do a story of salvation. The idea where you have this great horrible thing coming and people work together and they, it looks very grim, and then somehow they pull a miraculous save out of it.
That immediately makes me think of the film version Nation? Of not Zombie Nation, World War Z.
Oh, okay, they actually won that one, huh? But you think about even like was it I Am Legend? They found the cure at the end, and so. Well,
the I Am Legend is kind of weird though because
they don't deal with it actually.
No, like, and it's not. I got issues with how that movie ends. And we're getting into people should have seen these movies already, but I don't know that if we want to discuss.
Oh, spoiler alert!
Yeah, I always feel weird about doing spoilers or spoiler alerts on the show. It's kind of like
I'm really good at doing them right after we have the conversation.
Well, I feel like is it something that we should include in the show notes ahead of time so people be like, we talk about this movie or this book or this thing. So if you guys haven't read it or seen it, because I want to talk about it, but I also don't want to ruin people's. If we share something that's really cool, like both of these, I enjoyed both things, but I had small issues with it. But I Am Legend is a super rewarding movie to watch, and so is World War Z. They're fun. They're both super fun to watch. But so if people haven't watched it, I want them to go check it out. So
my major problem with I Am Legend was it seemed like they did a really good job up through the climax, and then they rushed to the end.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I like to have the story wrapped up, especially something like that. It needs a little bit longer resolution, but they were trying to make it a little bit more actiony and exciting, probably. And I'm sure that was a editorial decision. I bet you there are scenes cut from that.
There are, but for me, the logistics of it bother me. It's like they crack the glass, and I know that was done in post, but it's like he could have thrown the grenade, and there was plenty of space in the little cubby where she and I think it was the kid, were hiding, like there was plenty of room for him to get in there also. So it's like he sacrificed himself for no reason. Yeah. Not only that, he gives her the blood and like, this is the key. Okay, you're the blood and disease scientist who's been working on this alone for 3 years, and you're going to hand this bottle of blood and expect some podunk farming community in New Hampshire to know exactly what you did and how to replicate it and thus save people. It's so ridiculous.
It was a forced story of sacrifice, but it led to salvation. So
I mean,
thematically it was nice.
If you know, I think I would have preferred something like he got infected and for some reason he can't use the cure. I don't know. I just I didn't like it.
And the other major type of movie that makes me think of when I think of plague movies are Michael and my favorite types of stories. Apocalypses. We don't like the salvation. We want the destruction.
Oh, I want to see it all burn. I want to watch it all burn. Like Dawn of the Dead Man, how it's like absolutely hopeless. It's like, yay, we're going to make it. Oh, no. It's
so
more horrific horribleness. It's so, right. and the original. You got to watch I love the remake. I've seen the remake. I don't know how many times I pop the remake in. Every once in a while, if I'm bored, I'll just rewatch the remake of the 2008 version of Dawn of the Dead. But the original is so beautifully bleak. It is the ending sequence where they're flying the helicopter, and it is just it's just fields of zombies. It is terrifying, but not in a way that's like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. It's terrifying in a way that, oh my gosh, it is so hopeless. It's absolutely hopeless. Like, we're in a helicopter. How many places you can stop and fill up the gas tank on a helicopter?
1,000.
No,
1,000.
there's not a lot.
No.
So plagues. Now we're going to get into talking about some of what you'd expect. I have, and I'm not going to get into it right this second. I'm fighting the urge because when you first started talking about plagues off the air like a few days ago, or maybe it was like a week or two ago, it was in a thread I think on the Facebook page. I have a really cool idea, and I'll talk about it here on the show. And if you guys want to take it into your worlds and run with it, then by all means, I hope it's inspiring. I find it to be an inspiring idea, but it's an idea that I will probably not exploit myself, which is why I'm willing to give it away. So,
and even if you gave it away and you just said to use it later on, the stories aren't going to be the same.
True.
All right. And before we kind of get into the meat of the episode, there's one more thing I was thinking of too was, I think a great thing that usually is involved, not always, but usually involved when man-made problems happen or plagues happen. In fiction, a lot of times it's, at least in more modern fiction, man is somehow involved. A Andromeda strain comes to my mind like as the first one I can think of like that. But I think there's been several things since then when there's a horrible disease, and usually the zombie ones too. It's something that man has gone too far with, that either on purpose is released and gets out of control, or is accidentally let into the wild. And accidentally, I think of the Walking Man, The Stand. I'm sorry, The Stand by Stephen King comes to mind. But it's like man overreaching. And it's the man-made problem that has to be saved or is going to probably destroy the world. Hopefully.
This actually reminds me of a very brief anecdote. I saw 28 Days Later in theaters.
This is another example of that.
Yep. I saw that one in theaters. And if you
spoiler alert.
Well, I'm not going to really spoil. I'm going to talk about the very, very beginning of the movie. The very beginning of the movie is a bunch of animal rights activists breaking into a testing facility where they test on animals for diseases. Now, what they don't know is that they are engineering a disease, and they have broken in to let the animals out. Now, I am seeing the movie with a good friend of mine, a girl I went to high school with, this girl, Nora, who she's like, admittedly, I haven't spoken to Nora in probably 15 or so years, probably more than 15 years. But to give you an idea, she is like a yoga instructor, very earthy, hippie chick, super, sweet girl. And we're watching the movie. It's the very beginning, and they're breaking into the animal facility. And you know when someone starts a sentence and your brain works faster and your brain completes the sentence in your head, and then they say something completely different than what you completed in your head. Most of the time when you sort of complete their sentence in your head, you're right. Because usually what people say is predictable. Yeah. In this case, I still remember this very clearly because she leans over to me and whispers while we're watching this, because what happens is they go to let the animals out, and the animals attack them savagely. It is savage. And what I think she's going to say is, see, that's what you get for messing with animals. Like, because she's a very earthy, crunchy kind of girl. What she actually says is, see, that's what you get for being an animal rights activist. And I started laughing because the animal rights activists were the first ones that were attacked. They opened the cages and the monkeys just go crazy on them.
And irony trying to save the animals. And it goes
right. And I'm like, oh my gosh, did she just say that? Mm-hmm. Oh, that was just a gem for me. That was a funny moment. A great movie. If you haven't, you want to see a great plague movie done right, watch 28 Days Later. And for those of you who are Walking Dead fans, you're going to watch the beginning of that movie and go, hey, this is how The Walking Dead started. And yes, you're absolutely correct. And 28 Days Later came out like 10 years prior.
Prior to the graphic novels or prior to the TV?
I think the movie way precedes the graphic novels. I would need to look that up to confirm. Okay. But I do believe the movie precedes the
That's
the
10
books.
Years from the TV show, and we're assuming.
I'm also totally approximating. If you give me half a second, though, I can look at this, and you can continue on the next.
Well, I'll continue on for a second here. Yeah. Okay, so now let's start making a play, or let's start talking about what to think about when you're making a play and a plague. I
was going to say, enunciate, man. You're making.
That wasn't an enunciation. That was actually just saying the wrong.
Oh, word. You're just excited about killing people and making a grand sweeping.
Making a story of it. Yeah, I'm thinking like, the Walking Dead musical.
I think they do have a zombie. You know what they do? Evil Dead. They made a musical out of Evil Dead.
And if nothing else, I'm sure Trey Parker, Matt Stone probably have one out there somewhere.
Maybe.
Now, the first thing I like to think about when I'm using like something really powerful as a plot device is, what's the theme I'm trying to get at in the story, where I'm using something as powerful as a disease. Even if it's not the main plot, but if it's involved in any way, I want to know why I'm using it. And it might strictly be I'm trying to get to the horror of disease. So it could be very simple like that, or it could be something specific about man overreaching. So, think very carefully when you go about this. Why are you using such a powerful plot device? Don't just throw it out there because you're looking to add words. You'll add words with it, but it'll be more meaningful. Like if you're going for a horror theme with it, it helps you kind of figure out what kind of ways you want to deliver it to people. If you want to use it as a man-made contagion issue, you're still going to have horror themes, but you're trying to get at this deeper threat. So you need to get to the point where the characters figure out, about the man-made or fantasy race-made. Go ahead.
So 28 Days Later was released in 2002. The Walking Dead debuted in 2003. It was first published by Image Comics. So they didn't beat them by much, but they did. But
so we'll say it's sort of we'll credit it as being spontaneously around the same time. One, we'll just say got produced faster.
One's a year earlier.
It's a year, but making a graphic novel might take longer.
And that's a year to screen. It probably took a while to get from A to B, and they certainly wrote it before they were able to get funding and then make the movie. So my money says the movie.
But there's a process to build comics, and I don't know which one's.
I know.
But it could have also been a reaction to 28 Days. We're like, we need this. That would be a fair argument as well. We need this story. Go write it. Go draw it. But we'll be kind. I'll be kind. Michael isn't being kind. I'll be kind.
No. 28 days later gets the credit here. And you know what? I will further research this and find out. I'd be curious to know if Kirkman was inspired by seeing that, and he thought, kind of like a story starter, he thought, oh, wow, that's cool. I'm going to use that as
I wish they had done this. That could have also been the thing.
Exactly. Just kind of like, what is it? Gray. What's the Gray? The sex movie.
Gray Earl T.
Gray
yeah.
Shades of Gray.
Shades of Gray. 50 Shades of Gray.
50 Shades of Gray. 50 Shades of Gray started out as a Twilight fanfic.
The entire audience like, oh, they're faking that. They do the thing.
I'm not kidding. That's what it was. It was a Twilight fanfic, and it exploded into a full-blown, incredibly profitable franchise, which is kind of
who knows which one will end up being more profitable. With the types of themes in 50 Shades, that type of material typically makes more money.
Well, I'd be curious to know if The Walking Dead is literally a fanfic spinoff of 28 Days Later, and obviously Walking Dead is way bigger. So,
yeah.
All right,
at this
plagues.
Yeah, back to plagues. So another thing I like to think about too, especially in a fantasy setting, is what is the thing making the disease? Is it a synthetic type of disease? Is it natural? Is it magical? Or some kind of hybrid thereof?
Here's my thought, and right here's a good spot to. I was thinking about diseases the other day, and I was like, what if it's none of those things? What if it's not magical per se? You might call this magical, but my thought is, what if it is a spiritual disease? What if it affects a person's soul or or spirit, or however you define it in your universe, and it's passed between people that way? You make this weird ethereal sort of thing, and that is how the disease. I
think that's a very fair thing, and for me, when I think of magical, I kind of lump it together. But I think it's a very fair that a spiritual disease. I think I'm not sure. That seems familiar. I don't know if it's something I've thought about or if I've seen it somewhere. I might have.
No, totally original idea.
Yeah, of course. And what's that episode on originality? Well, I'll include it in the show notes.
There is no such thing. I think that was the conclusion.
And there's one other thing, though, I want you to think about, though. If this is something created by a sentient being, what's the purpose of it? Now, it might not even come out in the fiction, but it's good for you to keep in your mind because it helps you create the plot or the subplot that you're using it in.
We've talked about this before where as a writer, a storyteller, game maker, or whatever, you might be revealing to your audience, whether that be the player, the reader, or what have you, a given thing. That given thing tends to be like 10 to 50% of what is actually going on, and as the world builder, you have to know what's going on behind the scenes. So stuff like this is a great way, knowing the motivations or the reasons or the starting point. You might not ever reveal it in the story, but if you know it, it's going to give you leverage and know how to move things. And sometimes you have to be fluid and change those things on the fly if it doesn't work. We've had that discussion before too, where we've talked about how, is the thing in the story more important, or is the story more important? Is the world more important, or is the story more important? Sometimes you have to prioritize the world and change a thing in the story, and sometimes you can change this. You can change the story, and or sometimes you change the world and leave the story alone.
Well, and here's an important caveat to knowing why it was created, and I'm a big fan of doing this. When people do big things that are kind of dangerous, or end up being that way, I'm a fan of them. Even though they were created for a purpose, and it might even be similar to what happened, I like these kind of things to get out of control from the creator.
Kind of like an Emperor's, or what is it, the Wizard's Apprentice?
The Emperor's New Disease.
The Emperor's New Disease. I don't know where I was going when I said Emperor. I'm thinking of the Wizard's. The Sorceress's Apprentice is what is actually on my mind, and I could not find the right wording.
Yep. Yeah. No. I think it's sometimes, I don't think it even needs to be a disease needs to be created for the purpose of being a disease. Maybe it was meant to combat a specific disease in a body. There's some type of mutation, maybe natural, maybe synthetic, that causes this thing to go crazy.
It doesn't
always have to even be
right there.
It doesn't always have to be a negative reason it was done.
That's I Am Legend right there in a nutshell. They were trying to cure cancer with a version of measles or the mumps, and it mutated and became what it becomes in the movie.
Well, I know I read something interesting where there was a doctor who was out treating someone overseas in a plague type of zone and caught something that antibiotics could not cure, and just too resistant to all antibiotics. So some Yale researchers there's a lake in Connecticut that has a virus that attacks bacteria. So they infected them with a virus to kill the bacteria, and it worked. Yay, which is really cool. But that leads to a good story idea of what happens when that goes wrong. Somehow they merge or whatever. Have fun with it.
And that is sort of they kind of do something a little like that in World War Z. They would be infecting themselves with curable deadly diseases so that they won't be attacked by zombies to get an incurable deadly disease.
Hey, the things you do.
I know. Whatever to get by,
as long as you have the titanium crowbar.
The total side note, just because it's got me thinking about it. I don't think I've ever mentioned this on the show, and you might not know this either, but my favorite animal is the armadillo. I think they are a super cool little animal. Armadillos are the reason why a lot of people, like pretty much all of the cases of leprosy in the United States are from armadillos. Really? Yes, there are still cases of leprosy today in the United States, and it's usually from handling armadillos.
So if Michael's not encouraging people to give people armadillo pets.
I think they are an awesome little animal. They are very interesting to watch. They're like little tanks with feet, but don't play with them. And if you're riding around in Texas and down south, you'll see them as commonly as you would see squirrels in the northern, wooded areas of the United States. But don't play with them because you can actually get leprosy from armadillos.
Don't be that person.
Don't be that person. We want you safe, leprosy-free.
Okay, now here's another interesting thing, which I've used before in storytelling. Is the disease selective, or is everyone at risk? And in most stories, when there's diseases, everyone's at risk, which makes for the big salvation, the big apocalyptical thing. I had a disease in a vampire game that was created by vampire hunters to kill off vampires by starving them. Because what they were trying to do, their actual strategy was to cause vampires to become so noticeable in the world, which the game, part of the thing, the masquerade was to hide the fact that you're really there. They were trying to force that veil to be broken, causing humanity to be willing to literally go to war to wipe them out. It was a recruiting tool by the vampire hunters. And of course, it went out of... it got really bad for everyone involved.
See, I prefer when it's selective.
Yeah, mine was selective. The way it went bad was the side effect was it made the vampires feel ravenously hungry even when they were full. So they would just go on these sprees and really they couldn't control. It was always like they were almost out of blood, which in the game, there's a mechanic that causes you to risk frenzy whenever you're around something you can feed off of. And so it got out of hand really bad.
So just a whole lot of vampires doing a lot of slaughter. And since they're already full of blood, that means that when they start frenzying and using blood to fuel their frenzy, they've got plenty to do it.
And then you have older vampires who, when they figure out what's going on, they're actually causing the mortal population to start riots. So it will help cover up the fact of all these people getting killed. So it's just not a good thing.
See, it makes me think of like The Stand, and there was another, actually The Mist, in where they're like, why is one person safe and another person not? Like, why is this disease affecting me and not?
Those are the questions I think are great with selective. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. Like, how come you're immune? What makes you so special? Why did God choose you to live? And I'm dying and my wife is dying,
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. I think that's a wonderful thing. I don't know if it was Amazon or Netflix. No, it was HBO did a show where it wasn't a disease. People just like disappeared. We talked about it.
Yes. There's like 4 shows. I keep thinking of the 400, the 2200, the Vanishing, and it's none of those.
It's none of those.
I watched that first season and it was so good.
It was very good, and it kind of went downhill, I thought, after that. But the first season was incredible.
Yeah, basically, what was it, like 1/4 of the world's population just vanished for no reason?
And so the people who were left behind, especially there's like one woman who, like, her kids and husband all disappeared. And so she was the only one in her family, but other people, no one disappeared in their family. So it led to a lot of those kinds of questions, which when you get those kinds of questions around people, especially intimately, when it's characters that they care about's family or the characters they care about who suffer, it helps those questions get into the brains of the people who are consuming your fiction. It's a psychology thing.
I wish I could remember the name of this show. It's killing me that I'm drawing.
It will be in the show notes unless I forget, which is about a 90% chance. But go check the show notes just in case, and then troll me on Twitter until I add it in. Or in the Facebook group. Let's see.
Well, I think you should also talk about how it presents.
Well, we're getting to that, but before that, though, we have one more thing. If you're in a fantasy world with magic...
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that one.
Yep. Why can't magic not cure it? What's the problem there? Because in a fantasy world, why can't you just have the cleric, classic D&D, walk up and, I just memorized the spell. I can cure 5 people today, and then I can cure more people tomorrow. Maybe it spreads too fast, but you need some kind of explanation to why magic, as it exists when its story starts, at least, cannot solve the problem for you. Or else it'll be a really boring thing like, oh, horrible deadly plague cured. Okay, that was my microfiction disease story with a very anticlimactic ending.
Send them in to see the healer. Next, what you got? Cancer. Healer. What you got? Leprosy. Healer. Next.
Bubonic plague.
Take these and go away.
5 gold.
I want to go see the healer. No. Only big sicknesses today. We've got a whole plague coming around.
There's a whole plague. He doesn't have enough spells. Go home. Yeah, come back tomorrow.
You'll be fine. Just stay at home.
Everyone has to get a queue because it's like he can only cast a spell 5 times a day, so they have to sort everyone by how deadly the disease is.
Yes.
Well, your disease is deadly, but it takes a long time for you to die.
What would be the medieval version of insurance? Look at the peasants are coming along. I make bread. Other people make bread. Get to the back of the line.
Yeah, no. Well, that's very deadly, but we have plenty of bakers.
Yeah. What? I'm useful. I'm a contributing member of the society.
Well,
the neighborhood needs me.
That would take indulgences to a whole new level.
Blacksmith, he's the only one in town. Get him to the front.
But think about, let me tell you actually a good thing, though. Think of the whole indulgence scandal on Earth where people were buying to get time off of hell. What if you had to buy something from the church, give a donation to get a disease cured because there's only so many spells to go around?
Ooh, yeah. I could see that happen.
It actually kind of takes our little joke and makes it maybe a usable thing.
And another scary level of... Because the book World War Z does some really, really interesting things. And guys, read that book. There's a couple of things that they do. There's this plan that they put into place that basically sacrifices a whole bunch of people. And the guy that devised the plan understood if we don't know how and where to cut our losses, we are going to lose the whole world. So the plan was devised in one... I think might have been in Africa, might have been in South America, where they're like, okay, this area, we just can't help. We don't have the resources. We don't have the time. We need to wall off and protect this area. And if we can solidly do that, we can save all of these people. But this whole other area, if we try to spread our resources too thin, we will lose the entire continent. So we need to know where to cut our losses. Meanwhile, cut our losses, and I'm using air quotes here, means he has basically triaged and made a choice that is a death sentence for millions and millions of people. An ugly, necessary choice. Now, in this circumstances, it's on a massive scale. But if you're doing a nice little intimate story and you're just talking about a village and they only have one healer and
that's their world,
and he can only do 5 spells a day, then, you know, if there's too many problems for him to compensate for, you know, the spells, hard choices will have to be made. Maybe little Timmy doesn't get saved because, well, they have 6 children already. They can afford to lose one.
In a harsh analogy, Timmy's on the wrong side of the fire line.
Yeah. You know, we need soldiers. Orcs are still down the road. Save the soldier. Timmy's got to go. He can't lift a sword.
The disease is still on the other side of the castle wall, so we're keeping it there.
Alas, poor Timmy. I knew him well.
Okay. That was kind of creepy.
Yeah,
okay.
But great. This is a fun one. I like this one. Why do we? There's something wrong with us that we're enjoying that we enjoy all the really nasty and bad and horrible things that we create for fictional worlds. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong.
The apocalypses, all of this stuff. Yeah.
I mean, we get into the map episodes and the building episodes too, but it's like we get juiced up when we're like slaughtering people en masse.
Yes. Bring on the plague. Ding. Okay. Now, presentation of disease. That's sort of the medical term. I'm sure most people have seen medical TV shows and have heard that term before.
Of course.
Presentation is how does a disease show itself? And now here's some things to keep in mind with that. Sometimes diseases are well on their way before there's any noticeable presentation. It's like you might be able to do a test to pick it up, but if someone looked at you, they wouldn't know you were sick. The great example of this is the flu. You don't know that you have the flu when you start presenting the flu symptoms. You've been contagious already. and so you've already infected everyone around you. And so they're doomed. And luckily today, antibiotics hopefully keep working. I'm crossing my fingers because without antibiotics, flu is very nasty. And you know, that's where you get like the Spanish flu of the 20s. You know, plagues up until antibiotics, that was a very scary disease to show up because, like I said, you don't realize you're contagious and making people sick until it's too late. But you know, the thing is to think about too, what do you see in a person when the disease happens? Is it really noticeable? Is it a minuscule thing? Is it just like like a spotty rash on the face at first, and then those turn into boils, and then the blood starts to burn, and smoke comes out of their ears.
Redness around the neck, stiff joints, fire bursting off of their hands. I don't know. So crazy. I was going to say buttocks, but I decided to skip it. You could tell.
I was going to say a doctor could give you a shot for that. Yeah. So, but think about, and usually they progress and become worse leading up to what could happen. And that's a question to ask yourself. All diseases don't have to kill people. And most stories, diseases do, and do very quickly and get worse over time, which is usually the opposite. Viruses typically weaken over time. They don't typically get stronger. But that's okay. It's fiction, and it works really well. The formula's worked for a long time.
What are
the outcomes if someone survives? Are they the same? Are they changed? What happens if it is a killer or they get through the disease? What happens to the people afterwards?
Watch REC, and that is like a whole series. There's like a few of them. 12 Monkeys.
Yep. And my thought here, and this is a horrible Jeffrey thought, so scientists don't do this. Fiction writers have fun. Have a horrible sort of like disease that it is like your I Am Legend kind of disease where they finally get that cure at the end. And everyone's like, yay, we're saved. And they realized everyone who had the disease, even though they're cured, are sterile.
Well,
so it's a tie, I guess.
I'll take sterility over death.
Yes, but then what happens with the next generation? How many people really survive? Does the disease win in the end anyway? You think you've beaten the disease, but then no one can reproduce, or there's not enough people, and it's just.
Well, I think that the question in that circumstance is that, do we just have a cure or do we have a vaccination? Because then it's like, who didn't get sick, and thus those people need to, they need to be like quarantined. They need to be careful that the disease dies out.
Talk about world-changing stuff, because if you have enough, where it's just enough that the population might be able to reconstitute when the other people die, they all get pushed out of the city walls. And then the other people sit there, but they have to be very careful that they can't risk losing people.
Yeah. Oh, and they also, at that point, they need to start harvesting skills at that point. Like everybody that is not going to reproduce, because depending on
if there's a food shortage, they don't get the food.
Well, no. Well, yeah. But what I was actually also thinking is that in a lower tech level, trades are passed down in families. And you will sometimes see apprenticeships that occur, either through family members or through close friends. But generally, a trade would be passed father to son, and that's how it would go. So now all of a sudden, you have a whole bunch of people who are now sterile, and let's say someone hasn't had a child yet. If they don't take someone on to teach that skill might be lost.
Yep, most definitely.
The mastery of something that gets used all the time, like that has occurred throughout human history, where important skills have been lost. Some lost forever.
And sometimes reinvented down the road.
See Greek fire and Roman concrete.
Or steam engines, lost for eons until reinvented in the 1800s.
But they were reinvented. I'm saying these other two.
Well, what I'm saying is, but coincidentally, we came with concrete again as well. But it was lost for a long time how to make concrete. So, I mean, the thing is, most things are invented multiple times in multiple places. Sometimes pre-contact. Other times they're not necessarily that intuitive. Now, the other thing I think you need to think about too is what causes it to spread. All diseases aren't airborne. Some need some kind of contact, sometimes very intimate kinds of contact for it to spread. So that's another way, it's kind of like, making the decision as a science fiction guy, how faster than light travel works. Because if you make it really simple, people can really go anywhere at the maximum speed. But if you can limit it somehow, you can limit how things spread. So the same thing in here is how quickly does it spread? And then when you put these things together, when something spreads very quickly, presents very early and very devastatingly, it's going to capture the attention of people really fast, and you're going to get a lot of resources put trying to stop it. Where if it presents maybe very mildly, like it feels like a little mild cold, and then all of a sudden 2 months down the road, you've been projecting out and making people sick the entire time. All of a sudden, 2 months down the road, that's when it turns really ugly and it starts killing people. But by that time, it's spread so far, maybe millions of people have already captured the disease before they realize it's even a danger.
Trade routes, and even today, it's the same thing. But in the modern world, trade routes are airplanes. So that is how a lot of stuff gets spread. Where you'll see, like it'd be neat to see like a map of an actual disease and seeing how it spreads and how it goes from one place to another based on an individual traveling.
There's actually some new science out now on airborne diseases showing that they can go aloft into the upper atmosphere and spread through the jet stream.
And still get back down and still infect somebody?
And infect completely isolated area. It's less likely to happen, but airborne diseases can actually spread over the ocean. And so it's much rarer. So if the disease is in an area, especially if it's not airborne, it won't spread that way. But if it's airborne, flus, that's how they start in Asia. They end up over here. They thought it was airplanes, and airplanes, I'm sure, do play into that because people traveling back and forth. But it also just kind of goes up and comes down.
So in addition to like, okay, is it airborne? Is it a body fluid transfer? Is it just a physical contact? You just need to touch somebody. There's been plenty of things in movies where they just touch somebody and poof, you got it. So that's how it goes. But how does it stop? Can it be stopped? You know, if it can be stopped, like what are your precautions? What are your protections against this spreading plague? Just isolating yourself, breathing a different air. You know, do you need a self-contained air system? Do you need to, you know, just be away from everybody?
Or this is also my thought too, and this is Michael's fault for making me think about it, but it leads to the theme. So if the theme is to show what man will do to protect itself, or what the race will do to protect itself, in quotes, is once again, will they create a fire line? Would they go in and slaughter everyone between them and the diseased country to make sure the disease doesn't spread? Kill anyone approaching from that direction to make sure that no one gets to them.
Better yet, it's a magical disease that only spreads to people with blue eyes when they make eye contact with other people with blue eyes, and the action.
My house would be in trouble.
They get immediately super violent. So it's like they will kill everyone around them. So it doesn't matter if you don't have blue eyes; you need to stay away from everybody with blue eyes, and you got to blind everybody with blue eyes or mask them so they can't accidentally look at other people with blue eyes.
Disease is an endless way. It does not need to be the main thing, but it makes for a great massive background thing, like a major war would do the same thing. It's a very big plot device to use, but if used correctly, you can start adding in lots of questions for your characters to deal with moral quandaries along the way, which to me makes stories infinitely more interesting. I think even more so, and sometimes in a disappointing way with role-playing games, tabletop, because when it's not real people, when it's just a game, people are much more willing to do things that they might not do in the real world. But if they're good, it will really get into their mind and make them question stuff, because, some people are really good at doing that when they play games. So, but, it's just one of those things to think about. But, there's really one more thing that you kind of have to have for
this is pretty big, so you guys may want
this is the biggest
think about this.
And I'll let you give this one too.
You're gonna give it this. I mean, it's your sure notes. I think that you should have this one.
Okay, I'll do this one. Okay, what do you call the disease? Oh yeah, you're gonna want to name, and
gotta name it.
You might have two names, like you might have an official name, and then you might have a nickname for something.
The bloody killy poo poo virus. That's what I call it.
That's clever.
It's a spiritual slaughter virus, but I call it the bloody killy poo poo virus.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the spiritual diseases, the magical diseases, allow you new transmission methods that we don't currently have too. It's people who touch that tree all get the disease.
Well, or it could be a thing where distance is not a factor. So like people, it could be like certain characters that have an affinity for another ethereal plane. And so a piece of their spirit sits in that ethereal plane. In the physical plane, they're on opposite sides of the planet, and slowly but surely it's passing through this ethereal plane and hitting people's spirit in basically another dimension. And that is how it's spreading and affecting them and corroding them and making them different somehow. And it might then affect them physically, and slowly but surely, as it covers half your planet, people start putting two and two together and realizing that they're not the only one, that there's other people that are being affected by this too, and it's getting worse. But how is it spreading? And that one crazy old witch lady that has 14 cats at the end of the village that no one likes to talk to, and her husband died like 40 years ago, but people give her free bread because they feel sorry for her. She seems to understand exactly what's going on, but she is crazy. Sorry, I had a tangent there.
Oh, okay. And
I think I'm done.
Yeah. Which before we hit the world building topic here, I have one more transition method for people not to forget about. Chemical warfare started with the use of certain types of materials and diseases being chucked at people who are fighting you. So if you're sieging a town, you actually take dead bodies, you chop them up, and you catapult the bodies over the wall. And it's like the first example of real like chemical warfare I could think of, chemical biological warfare, was ancient Greece in the Peloponnesian War. And now you could argue that they were dipping arrows in diseases and poisons before this, but I think it was the Spartans were fighting Athens. I'll just guess. If I remember correctly, that's what was happening. The Spartans had a huge pile of sulfur that they burned, and they tried to use the wind to blow it over at the enemy army to try and make them sick, because burning sulfur is not something you want to inhale. So, I mean, this goes back into really ancient times, and there's probably examples before that they just weren't recorded. The Greeks like to write things down, thankfully. So, but ancient militaries might be the way things spread. There's an argument the bubonic plague was brought back to Europe because the Mongols were mad at, I think, Genosian traders, and they like fired arrows that actually had like body parts on them onto their ship as they were leaving a port in the Black Sea, and it got some people on the ship sick, who then delivered it to Genoa. Now, I think it's been kind of debunked at this point, but in theory, that type of stuff did happen.
And another small history footnote, and the unfortunate truth is I read the book so long ago that I don't remember the details exactly, but the Black Plague and the Black Death are not the same thing.
Okay.
It's true.
Okay.
Look it up. There's quite a few years in between those two things. There is possibly a correlation and an overlap, but when history books and stories refer to the Black Plague and or the Black Death, they're not talking
they're
about
two different events.
They're two different
maybe
events.
Even the same disease, but they're two different events, definitely.
Yes, okay. and if people use them synonymously, they are doing it wrong.
Yeah, and I can get culturally, maybe I'll do an episode at some point on cultural effects after big plagues, but that's a different episode.
It's a different episode. So it's probably a pretty safe bet you guys are going to realize that the world builder task for the day is to create a plague. Natural, it could be magical, it could be spiritual, it could be man-made. War game it out, soundboard with your friends, talk to your neighbors, terrify them. That's always fun.
Going to the Undercroft to war game it out too. It's awesome.
Yeah, come talk to us. Get on. Speaking of the Undercroft, big shout outs to Chris and Isaiah, who just joined a couple days ago. They're both new members of the Facebook Undercroft closed group for the show. Come join us, say hello, tell us what you're working on, make some new world builder friends. It's a really great community.
Yes, growing. It seems like every week now at this point. So it's pretty good for something that we've not really pushed outside of a mention here or there. Okay. And now this one is a Jeffrey special. I don't know if Michael even knows about this.
I am very well aware of this. And once you say what it is, I got something to say about it.
Okay. The real world task is, if you want to crash course in generically the way diseases work, there is a Android game, I'm sure it's on iOS too, called Plague Inc. I found it to be a very fun game. I played the free version for a long time, enjoyed it immensely.
I have played it, and I destroyed the entire world on my first try. And since I killed every living person on the planet in one try. So I'm going down with a perfect record. I purposefully didn't play the game again because I was like,
pretty hard.
There's nowhere to go from here. I killed everyone on the planet. I had a 100% success rate. It took a while. I had a moment where it was topping off, and I was like, no. And then there was some.
You got some mutation at the right time to.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't necessarily that something happened by accident. I actively did something, and I made the right choice, and then it started. The creep spread continued. It didn't climb real high the way it was before, but it slowly creeped and eventually wiped out everybody.
Yeah, I made the mistake the first time I played was I got the mutations and I went straight for something nasty. Something a very obvious symptom, which I thought was nasty. And when you throw up those nasty symptoms, the people react and start trying to cure it. And
I purposefully avoided that so that people wouldn't realize, just because I wanted everyone to get sick. So as you guys are probably realizing, Plague Inc. is literally you are engineering a disease, and the goal of the game is to wipe out the entire planet. it's intricate. Like there is a whole bunch of things that go into play in the mechanics of the game, but it is a really good way to think about what your disease, what your plague might do or need to wipe people out, and or what would be the linchpin in stopping it. Because for story purposes, obviously, if you wipe out your entire world, then what fun is that?
If you want to do one story in that world,
yeah. I think it's more fun to have at least a few people survive, so there's someone to tell the tale.
Yeah, exactly. Our faux apocalypses, which we call apocalypses.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's a great game. It's a lot of fun. There's a free version, at least there used to be when I played it. I think I used my Google rewards at some point and paid the premium. I have to see if I can go get that again, because there's like several different types of diseaes, but it will really give you a crash course of diseases pretty quickly.
Yeah. There's a lot of things in there that I hadn't considered. Like, does it affect animals? Does it only affect your human characters or humanoid characters, or can animals get it? Because if animals can spread it, they're not as cautious as we are when it comes to preventing them sharing diseases. So it could spread. That was also a key component to mine, was making sure that animals could pass it along. Losing my train of thought. It was something about another thing about Plague Inc. Nope, got nothing. Lost it.
All right, got nothing. So we'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.